This month I tried to let go of that plastic bag. And you know what? I ate quite a few bananas. Let me explain. This past month, trying to unplug from plastics, I often found myself in cafes and grocery stores, hungry and needing to eat lunch, but not wanting to buy anything in a plastic container. I wanted to honor the commitment I'd made to reduce the amount of disposable plastic I used during the month of April. In short, I wanted to try to live up to my song. I did pretty well. I packed this bamboo fork and spoon set, which meant that I didn't have to use any plastic cutlery. And I also packed a little cloth towel with me so that I didn't have to use paper towels as well. I toted trusty cloth bags, and when I had forgotten one, I sometimes carried grocery items in my hands where everyone could see them. When I was hungry and in need of fast food, I often bought a banana instead of a sandwich in a plastic case. Sounds virtuous, right? Well, except that, according to the Canadian Fair Trade Network, bananas are the most heavily sprayed food crop in the world, with 4 of the chemicals used classified as extremely hazardous by the World Health Organization. The intensive production methods used to ensure high yields cause significant damage to soil, water, and fish. And the major corporations farming the bananas spend more on chemicals than they do on paying their workers, whose lives are, of course, damaged by the chemicals. Equifruit, based in Quebec, is one of 2 importers of fair trade bananas in Canada. It works hard to ensure fair wages and working conditions for people in Peru and Mexico. But of course, even those fair trade bananas have to be shipped from Peru and Mexico to Canada, where we eat about 3 billion bananas every year. I bring up that banana problem as a kind of confession, to admit that as a fully participating person in this society, I find it difficult to disengage from products and practices that I know to be harmful to the earth and its creatures. Things have changed since the days when disposable plastics and other convenience items were seen as the ticket to happiness. We now see the toll that they're taking on the planet, and around the world, a movement is now underway to reduce our use of plastics through legislation, to replace them with more eco-friendly alternatives, and even break them down in new ways using enzymes and bacteria. We're no longer so in love with plastics. Things have changed in that regard. But what hasn't changed so much is our relationship to consumer goods in general, and to a way of life that keeps us moving at a pace that may be impossible to sustain. I wonder whether we have the ability to change, whether we have the plasticity, if you will, to imagine another way of life and to transform ourselves so it might be possible. Right now, it seems to me we're witnessing and we're living through a clash of 2 value systems. One that honors and rewards high productivity, immediate gratification, personal comfort, and individual achievement. And another value system that calls for mindfulness, voluntary simplicity, and personal sacrifice for the well-being of the whole. Human beings are so oriented toward accomplishment and improving things. We've created products that seem to nurture us by making our lives more comfortable and efficient, when in fact, as we know, we're harming ourselves and the earth. This is in some ways a parallel to many frameworks of addiction, in which substances providing immediate comfort and pleasure also compromise the user's health and well-being and foster a dependency on those substances. If allowed to escalate addictions can be fatal. And so it is too with the addiction to comfort and convenience that we are experiencing now as human beings in the developed world. Today, many of us will surely be aware of how inadequately prepared we are to completely unhook from plastics or fossil fuels. Even trying to do so for one day will show us how difficult this is. I'm not saying this to be self-critical, but to point out how completely enmeshed we are in the interdependent web of existence, to quote our Unitarian seventh principle. How caught we are in the web that we helped create. Becoming more and more agitated about our situation is not likely to help, but there are wise teachers who can show us other ways of responding. Buddhist nun Pema Chodron describes our predicament as the big squeeze. She writes that on the level of social action, often also on the level of our family, at work, or in our community, our ideals and the reality of what's really happening don't match. She says that in these times, we are often tempted to run away, or escape, or give up. Likewise, Quaker teacher Parker Palmer speaks of the tragic gap between the good we know is possible and the profound and ongoing suffering of the world. I tend to draw on contemporary interpreters of the ancient religions, but you can find this idea in Scripture going back through the centuries. Embedded in virtually all wisdom teachings, you'll find the description of paradox, the crux or cross of things that seem irreconcilable. And in these teachings, we hear the call to stay present in that uncomfortable place where we are deeply aware of problems and also deeply aware of our difficulty in solving them. In her 2014 book, This Changes Everything: Capitalism versus the Climate, Naomi Klein suggests that the reason so many of us have failed to act is not because we are too selfish to care about an abstract or seemingly far-off problem, but because we are utterly overwhelmed by how much we do care. Utterly overwhelmed by how much we do care. I think she's absolutely right, and so we need to cultivate the tools to address how overwhelmed we feel. That is, tools that might transform our consciousness, change the way we respond to stress, fear, and anxiety. Klein writes that the task is to articulate not just an alternative set of policy proposals, but an alternative worldview to rival the one at the heart of the ecological crisis. An alternative worldview embedded in interdependence rather than hyper-individualism, reciprocity rather than dominance, and cooperation rather than hierarchy. This vision is, of course, very much in line with our Unitarian Universalist principles. Inconveniently, though, it seems to me anyway, Unitarian Universalism doesn't provide a simple and easy path toward the personal change that is needed for us to live in this new way. Put in traditional religious terms, UUism doesn't offer us a simple path towards salvation or enlightenment. Our UU principles call us to a higher or more ethical way of living, one that is essentially countercultural. But in themselves, they don't provide instructions to learn to live that way. Even I can't say it. What Unitarianism does do is point us toward a comprehensive list of wisdom sources, essentially all the wisdom in the world, and gives us the freedom and the responsibility to use it as we see fit to seek out our own path toward personal growth and spiritual maturity. There are common threads that run through all the world's religions and much secular wisdom as well, and you will find the teachers that are right for you based on your own temperament. No matter which sources of wisdom you're drawn to, you might notice some of these themes and messages that I believe will be helpful to us as we live through the coming times of climate change, do what we can to mitigate it, and respond to the crises that may arise because of it. I've framed this list in my own words, and I'm sure it may be incomplete. First, living in the present moment, practicing radical acceptance of the real, the actual, the present, the full, and the whole, being fully present in the here and now, whatever's going on. Cultivating gratitude, awe, wonder, and curiosity, again, whatever's going on. Acknowledging our shadow, our capacity to do harm as well as good, recognizing the darkness within ourselves and the unconscious motivations of many of our actions. Cultivating a cosmic consciousness, an awareness of our smallness in a universe of hundreds of billions of galaxies, honoring all we do not know and all we cannot control. Becoming willing to let go of personal power, control, and comfort for the collective well-being of the whole, practicing nonviolence and service to others. And finally, developing a relationship with something more than our limited ego awareness, whether that be called God, higher power, inner teacher, true self, source, great mystery, or something else. It's generally recommended that these outlooks or skills be developed through some form of regular contemplative practice. This, of course, can take many, many forms, everything from traditional prayer or meditation to walking in nature, reading poetry, practicing yoga, creating art or music, chanting, dancing, and more. Speaking of the brain's plasticity, it's now known that mindfulness meditation literally changes the brain. It reduces the volume of the amygdala, which is responsible for fear, anxiety, and stress. That's good news for any of us, myself included, who become overwhelmed by caring too much, as Naomi Klein put it. In order to be resilient, to be courageous and compassionate during whatever times of crisis may come, we will need to maintain a peaceful presence, even as we are afraid. Needless to say, this changed way of being that is less anxious and less grasping cannot be delivered in any sermon or any book, nor can it be acquired and held on to forever. It can simply be renewed and refreshed in moments of awareness and love, moments in which we feel embraced and deeply safe within this imperfect world, in communion with all other people and indeed with all life. From this place of deeper peace, from this place of deep interconnection, we may find that we are able to slow down and do less, to live in a more humble way, more focused on collective needs than individual desires, to abstain from that blister pack, to mindfully and gratefully pack a simple sandwich made at home, to join with others working to change legislation on plastics or to seek alternatives to our consumer-driven economic system, and to actively oppose the expansion of the Trans Mountain Pipeline in British Columbia, which, along with other similar projects, perpetuates our addiction to fossil fuels in potentially catastrophic ways. If we allow ourselves to be changed, we might find ourselves better able to offer love, presence, and peace to each other and to ourselves and to a hurting world, even as we witness and grieve the loss of so much. Also, we will be able to do so, I hope and pray, as we acknowledge our own imperfection when it comes to climate ethics. In the conclusion of her book, Active Hope: How to Face the Mess We're In Without Going Crazy, Joanna Macy writes, "We live at a time when the living body of our earth is under attack, and when the attacker is not an alien force, but our own industrial growth society. At the same time, an extraordinary recovery process is underway, a vital creative response we call the Great Turning. What helps us face the mess we're in is the knowledge that each of us has something significant to offer, a contribution to make. In rising to the challenge of playing our best role, we discover something precious that both enriches our lives and adds to the healing of our world. So may we start where we are, right now and right here, knowing that things have changed in the way we see ourselves, our habits, our lives, and our future, yet at the same time, being willing to be changed in ways we may not yet imagine, in service to this interdependent earth that is our shared and beloved home.